Have you ever noticed how silence can hurt more than words? How being ignored can feel louder than being yelled at? In narcissistic relationships, silence is not calm and it is not peace. It is a message, and that message is meant to unsettle you. The silent treatment is one of the most powerful tools used to control, punish, and destabilize, and it often leaves people questioning their sanity rather than the behavior being used against them. What makes this form of emotional withdrawal so damaging is how easily it is minimized. It is brushed off as needing space, being tired, or avoiding conflict. But your body knows the difference. You feel the anxiety, the self doubt, and the sudden urgency to fix something you may not even understand. That reaction is not weakness, it is the predictable response to having connection used as leverage. Today, we are going to name this behavior for what it is, not distance, not misunderstanding, but a deliberate tactic that keeps people emotionally hooked while stripping them of their voice. When you understand how the silent treatment works, you stop blaming yourself for the pain and start seeing the pattern clearly. And clarity is where your power begins. The silent treatment is often misunderstood as someone needing space or time to process emotions, but in narcissistic dynamics, it functions as punishment. It is not a pause for reflection. It is a calculated withdrawal designed to cause discomfort, distress, and emotional instability in the other person. The narcissistic individual uses silence to communicate disapproval without taking responsibility for direct confrontation. By refusing to speak, respond, or acknowledge your presence, they send a clear message that you have done something wrong and now you must suffer the consequences. This form of punishment is especially powerful because it is invisible. There are no raised voices or obvious accusations, yet the emotional impact can be profound. Silence creates a vacuum that the other person instinctively tries to fill. You start scanning your memory for mistakes, wondering what triggered the shutdown and how to fix it. That internal scramble is exactly what the narcissist is aiming for. Instead of focusing on their behavior, you turn inward, questioning your worth, your choices, and your right to express needs. Punitive silence also allows the narcissist to maintain a sense of superiority. By withholding communication, they position themselves as the judge and you as the one awaiting a verdict. Contact resumes only when they decide you have been sufficiently humbled or compliant. This reinforces an unequal dynamic where they control not just the relationship, but your emotional state. Over time, this conditioning trains you to associate disagreement or independence with emotional abandonment. What makes this tactic particularly harmful is that it bypasses healthy conflict resolution. There is no discussion, no clarification, and no mutual understanding. Problems are not solved, they are buried under fear and anxiety. The punished person often apologizes even when they are unsure what they are apologizing for, just to restore connection. This erodes self-trust and normalizes the idea that love must be earned through emotional suffering. The silent treatment as punishment is not about boundaries or self-care. Healthy distance is communicated and temporary. Punitive silence is vague, prolonged, and unpredictable. Its purpose is to destabilize you so that you become more focused on regaining approval than on maintaining your own emotional integrity. Over time, this can lead to chronic anxiety, hypervigilance, and a deep sense of unworthiness because the absence of communication feels like the absence of love. Understanding this distinction is crucial because it helps you stop personalizing the silence. When you recognize that the quiet is a tactic, not a reflection of your value, you begin to reclaim your emotional ground. The silence stops being a mystery and becomes a pattern, and patterns can be named, understood, and ultimately broken. Silence in narcissistic relationships is not accidental, and it is rarely about emotional overwhelm. It is used to regain control and dominance when the narcissistic person feels challenged, questioned, or exposed. When their sense of superiority is threatened, they do not engage in healthy dialogue because that would require accountability. Instead, they retreat into silence as a way to reassert power and remind the other person who holds emotional authority in the relationship. Control through silence works because it creates imbalance. Communication is a shared space, and when one person abruptly withdraws it, the other is left destabilized. The narcissist knows that withholding responses, eye contact, or basic acknowledgement places them in a position of control. You are left waiting, guessing, and emotionally suspended while they remain untouched and seemingly unbothered. That contrast reinforces their dominance and your vulnerability. This tactic also allows them to avoid responsibility while still punishing you. There is no argument to point to, no words to challenge, and no behavior that is easy to call out. If you confront them later, they may minimize it, deny intent, or accuse you of being overly sensitive. Meanwhile, the message has already been delivered, you stepped out of line, and now access to them has been revoked. Control is achieved without confrontation, which makes it even more insidious. Silence as dominance often appears after you assert a boundary, express a need, or disagree with them. Those moments threaten the narcissistic illusion of control. Instead of negotiating, they shut down communication to reestablish hierarchy. The unspoken rule becomes clear: your voice is welcome only when it aligns with their comfort. Over time, you may start censoring yourself, anticipating the silence, and choosing compliance over authenticity. The power of this tactic lies in its unpredictability. You never know how long the silence will last or what will end it. That uncertainty keeps you emotionally hooked. You may try to appease, explain, or overfunction in the hope of restoring connection. Each attempt reinforces their control because they learn that silence makes you bend. The relationship becomes less about mutual connection and more about managing their reactions. Dominance through silence also feeds the narcissist's internal narrative of superiority. They see themselves as the one who can withdraw and still be chased. Your distress becomes proof of their importance and control. This dynamic is emotionally exhausting and can slowly erode your sense of agency because your emotional stability becomes dependent on their willingness to engage. Recognizing silence as a tool of control rather than a communication style is a critical step toward clarity. When you stop interpreting the quiet as something you must fix, you begin to see how dominance has been maintained. Awareness breaks the spell because control only works when you believe the silence holds meaning about your worth rather than their need for power. The silent treatment creates anxiety, self-doubt, and emotional confusion because it attacks the most basic human need for connection and clarity. When communication is suddenly withdrawn without explanation, your nervous system interprets it as a threat. The body does not experience silence as neutral, it experiences it as danger. Your heart races, your thoughts spiral, and your sense of emotional safety collapses because the relationship has suddenly become unpredictable. Anxiety takes hold first. You wait for messages that do not come, you reread old conversations, and you stay hyper alert to any sign that the silence might break. This constant state of anticipation keeps your body in stress mode. You may struggle to sleep, lose focus, or feel a persistent knot in your chest. The uncertainty is what makes it so powerful because the mind naturally tries to resolve unresolved situations, and the silence offers no resolution. Self doubt quickly follows. In the absence of information, you start filling in the blanks, and most people turn the blame inward. You wonder if you were too much, too emotional, or too demanding. You replay your words and tone, searching for the moment you must have crossed a line. This internal questioning slowly chips away at your confidence and makes you distrust your own perceptions. Instead of asking why they chose silence, you ask what is wrong with you. Emotional confusion deepens because the silence contradicts any moments of closeness that came before it. One moment you felt connected and valued, and the next you are erased. That sudden shift creates cognitive dissonance. Your mind struggles to hold two opposing realities, being cared for and being ignored. To reduce that discomfort, many people cling to the version that feels safer, believing the silence must be temporary or deserved. This keeps you emotionally stuck and hopeful even as you are being hurt. The lack of clear communication also prevents emotional closure. Without words, there is no context, no explanation, and no chance to process what happened. You are left in an emotional limbo where nothing feels resolved. This unresolved state keeps you mentally tied to the person even in their absence. The silence becomes louder than words because it occupies so much mental space. Over time, repeated exposure to this dynamic can rewire your emotional responses. You may become hypervigilant, constantly monitoring moods and cues to avoid triggering silence again. You learn to prioritize their emotional state over your own stability. Anxiety becomes your baseline, and self doubt becomes automatic because peace depends on their engagement. The emotional confusion caused by the silent treatment is not a sign of weakness. It is a predictable response to psychological manipulation. When connection is used as leverage, the mind reacts with fear and self questioning. Understanding this helps you separate your emotional response from your worth and see that the chaos you feel was created, not imagined. Narcissistic individuals are often given the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the silent treatment because silence can look passive or unintentional. But in this dynamic, the silence is deliberate. They know it hurts because they have watched it work. They have seen the anxiety it creates, the way you reach out, the way your tone softens, and your boundaries weaken. This awareness is what turns silence into a tool rather than a coincidence. The narcissist learns early in the relationship how sensitive you are to disconnection. Everyone has a threshold for emotional distance, and once that threshold is discovered, it can be exploited. When they withdraw and notice that you become distressed, apologetic, or desperate to restore harmony, they register that silence gives them leverage. From that point forward, it becomes a go-to response whenever they feel challenged or dissatisfied. This is not about emotional incapacity or being unable to communicate. Narcissistic individuals can be highly articulate when it serves them. They can argue, charm, explain, and persuade when they want something. The sudden inability to communicate appears selectively and strategically. It shows up when accountability is required or when they want to avoid a conversation that threatens their self-image. The timing of the silence reveals intent. They also understand the asymmetry of the situation. They know that you are the one who values resolution, connection, and emotional clarity. By refusing to engage, they place you in a one-sided struggle. You are left carrying the emotional weight while they remain emotionally detached. That imbalance is not accidental, it is calculated. They are fully aware that the silence will keep you emotionally occupied while they maintain control. Another indicator of awareness is how easily the silence ends once they get what they want. The moment you apologize, concede, or soften your stance, communication often resumes as if nothing happened. There is rarely acknowledgement of the pain caused by the silence. That lack of repair shows that the distress was not an unfortunate side effect, but an acceptable cost. If they truly did not understand the harm, they would show curiosity, remorse, or concern. Minimization and denial further reveal awareness. When confronted about the silent treatment, they may claim they were just busy, needed space, or did nothing wrong. These explanations are used to avoid accountability while still benefiting from the impact of their behavior. The focus shifts to your reaction rather than their choice to withdraw. This deflection protects their sense of innocence while preserving the tactic for future use. Understanding that the silent treatment is knowingly used changes the narrative. It moves the experience out of confusion and into clarity. The pain you feel is not a misunderstanding or oversensitivity. It is the predictable outcome of a behavior chosen because it hurts and because hurting you restores their sense of control. In narcissistic dynamics, the goal of the silent treatment is not resolution or mutual understanding. If resolution were the goal, there would be conversation, clarification, and accountability. Instead, the silence is designed to produce compliance. It is meant to train you to fall in line, to back down, and to prioritize keeping the peace over expressing your truth. The absence of communication becomes a pressure system that pushes you towards surrender rather than growth. Compliance is achieved through discomfort. When silence creates anxiety and self-doubt, you naturally look for ways to make it stop. The fastest way often seems to be apologizing, agreeing, or minimizing your needs. Over time, you learn that asserting yourself leads to emotional withdrawal, while compliance restores connection. This creates a powerful behavioral loop where you are conditioned to abandon your own perspective to maintain access to the relationship. Resolution requires two people willing to tolerate discomfort and engage honestly. Narcissistic individuals avoid this because true resolution threatens their self-image. It requires acknowledging fault or considering another person's experience. Silence allows them to bypass that process entirely. They do not have to explain themselves, reflect, or change. The problem simply disappears once you comply. In their mind, the issue was not the conflict, but your resistance. This dynamic slowly reshapes your behavior. You may start anticipating their reactions and adjusting yourself preemptively. You become quieter, more agreeable, and less likely to challenge inconsistencies or disrespect. Compliance becomes a survival strategy. You are no longer engaging as an equal partner, but as someone managing another person's moods to avoid punishment. The lack of resolution also means that issues are never truly settled. They remain unresolved beneath the surface, ready to resurface later. This keeps you in a constant state of emotional instability because nothing is ever repaired, only postponed. The relationship feels fragile because it is built on avoidance rather than understanding. You may feel close during periods of harmony, but that closeness is conditional and easily withdrawn. The narcissist benefits from this because compliance reinforces their sense of control. Each time you give in to end the silence, they learn that they do not need to change. You will do the emotional labor for both of you. The relationship becomes one-sided with your flexibility supporting their rigidity. Over time, this imbalance can drain your energy and erode your sense of self. Understanding that the goal is compliance helps you stop expecting resolution from silence. It clarifies why conversations go nowhere and why patterns repeat. When you see that the silence is meant to shape your behavior rather than solve a problem, you can begin to step out of the cycle. Awareness gives you the option to choose self-respect over submission and emotional honesty over conditional peace. Healing truly begins when you stop chasing the silence because chasing keeps you locked in the very dynamic that is harming you. When communication is withheld, the instinctive response is to reach out, explain, apologize, or overextend in an attempt to restore connection. While this response is human, it also reinforces the power of the silent treatment. Each time you chase, you confirm that silence works and that your emotional stability depends on their willingness to engage. Stopping the chase is not about becoming cold or unfeeling. It is about reclaiming your emotional agency. When you no longer rush to fix what you did not break, you begin to step out of the role of emotional caretaker. You allow the discomfort of silence to exist without scrambling to resolve it. This is difficult at first because the silence has been conditioned to feel intolerable. But tolerating it is what breaks the conditioning. When you stop chasing, you also stop abandoning yourself. Instead of turning all your attention toward their withdrawal, you turn inward and ask what you need in that moment. This shift is subtle but powerful. It moves the focus from earning connection to maintaining self-respect. You begin to recognize that communication should be mutual and that you are not responsible for managing another person's emotional availability. The silence loses its power when it no longer produces the desired response. Narcissistic dynamics rely on predictable reactions. When the expected anxiety, apologies, or pursuit do not appear, the tactic becomes less effective. This does not always lead to immediate change in the other person, but it does create change within you. You become less reactive and more grounded. Your sense of stability starts coming from your own values rather than their behavior. Stopping the chase also brings clarity. Without the constant effort to restore communication, you can observe patterns more objectively. You see how often silence appears after you assert yourself and how rarely it leads to genuine